Welcome to Rock and Reddit. Let's get started. Lawyers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment in court? Literally the first thing I ever did was just a law student intern. Guy has alleged defense on a drug possession case. Drugs found in a jacket. Guy wasn't wearing jacket. They were going to have a very difficult time proving the jacket belonged to my guy. Had a long meeting with client. Explained everything. Client was excited. Day of the preliminary hearing. Guy shows up and sits down directly in front of the officer who arrested him. While wearing the jacket in question. The exact same jacket we were going to say they couldn't prove belonged to him. Not me but my former law partner. She was in court representing a client, I think in a hearing for a restraining order against her soon-to-be ex-husband. Our client was telling the judge that when they met to exchange the children for visitation, the ex had kicked her. He immediately angrily shouted, "She can't prove it. I didn't leave a mark." Thanks, buddy. Probably the funniest one I ever came across happened to a colleague. We were prosecutors then. 18-year-old defendant applying for bail. He needed a residential address and got his dad to show up at court to confirm that the family home was available to him. Defense lawyer gets old dad to confirm that son can stay at family home. Dad says yes. My fellow prosecutor gets up and asks dad, "Do you really want him home?" Dad goes off the deep end. Jesus. The grief he's brought me and his mother. Out all hours. Taking drugs. Hiding stolen property in the garage. All night parties. I'm on antidepressants and the wife's had a nervous breakdown. Dad goes off on one for 5 solid minutes. As the defendant gets taken back to the cells, he calls out back, "Thanks dad. I owe you one." Sat in on a personal injury case where the plaintiff broke their leg in an accident and had a doctor on the stand as an expert. The woman's lawyer begins questioning the doctor about their experience with leg injuries. He was a well-known orthopedic surgeon in the area. She asks if has ever treated a tibia fracture. The leg bones are tibia and fibula. To which he only answers no. Then she starts grilling him with questions about the tibula. After about 6 to 7 questions she asks, "How did you get a medical license and have been able to practice medicine this long if you've never treated a tibia fracture?" And begins a small rant about going after his credentials and those that gave it to him. To which he simply responds, "There is no bone named the tibia." The lawyer became beet red and everyone in the room tried their best to keep from laughing, including the judge. I was representing a plaintiff in a hit and run case. Plaintiff is testifying and is, despite me preparing them for several hours the previous day, an absolutely terrible witness for her own case. Like, she couldn't even identify the street she was crossing when she was hit by the car. It was a major highway, and we had gone through the sequence of events countless times the day before the hearing. The oh shit moment came during cross-examination. Defense counsel pulls out a picture of my client dressed up and ready to hit the club, which was posted to Facebook the day after the alleged accident. I, thinking quickly, object because the timestamp refers to when it was posted, not when it was taken. Defense counsel show the picture to my client and asked her when the picture was taken. Sure enough, they say it was taken the day after the accident, when she was supposedly in unbearable pain. Oh, shit. Represented a woman charged with multiple very serious felonies. She insisted that in the months before the offense, she'd been seriously dating one of the detectives who ultimately wound up investigating and testifying in her case. For a variety of reasons, I trusted this client and believed her, even though the detective never disclosed the relationship in his report. So, during his testimony, I asked Detective Smith, "You had a romantic relationship with Ms. Defendant, correct?" He goes, "What? No," and is visibly offended. The judge looks at me like I've lost my mind. The Commonwealth attorney audibly says, "What?" I'm freaking out because a large part of my cross and argument was focused on the bias formed by the prior relationship, and now I've got nothing, and I've lost all credibility. I try again. "Detective Smith, have you had a sexual relationship with Ms. Defendant?" As the Commonwealth rises to object, and the judge starts to scold me, the detective goes, "Oh, yay, we've had sex. It just wasn't very romantic." UK, bear with me on this one. I was in court listening to the most boring old defense lawyer you've ever seen. He was questioning the arresting officer in the case. It was drugs or something like that. Anyway, He's droning on about every little detail and the magistrate was constantly telling him to hurry along. The arresting officer was getting noticeably annoyed and the room became empty pretty quick. Everyone was very bored and annoyed. He was droning about details that I'm not sure anyone was really listening to or cared about. Anyway, he went over arrest times and the likes with the officer. Time he admitted the suspect and released him. He had bored the officer to the point where he was barely paying attention. So he was admitted in at 21:45 on the night in question. Yes, and released the night after. Yes, and that was what? Just after 10 PM. Guess what time after 10? I don't know. 10:15 maybe. So my client was detained for more than 24 hours. Wait, the penny dropped. The officer let his guard down and had revealed he kept the defendant for more than 24 hours, which is the maximum time for detention in the UK. The defense rested and the magistrate threw the case out immediately. Well played, sir. Well played. I think this qualifies. Though it wasn't me, that was the lawyer. Got called for jury duty. Was at the jury selection phase and they asked if anyone here thinks they should not. Blah blah. Defendant was in the room. I raised my hand. The defending lawyer looked at me like, oh, this ought to be good, and asked me to explain. I suggested I tell them in private. He insisted I tell the courtroom. I said, okay, I probably shouldn't be on this jury because I was on a previous jury for this man which returned a guilty verdict. Lawyer's face went, oh shit. Commotion and a wait while they looked up records. Yeah, verified. Whole jury was now tainted. Everyone goes home and they start over. I was involved in a pretty messy custody case. The other party was a mess and had kept the child from my client for a few weeks. Op was playing lots of stupid games and kept requesting continuances. I requested a drug test, which the judge ordered. However, the op didn't show up for it. To clarify, he did show up. He just stood in front of the toilet for literally 2 hours and claimed he couldn't pee. I was representing the plaintiff, so the burden was on me. I called multiple witnesses that testified to the defendant's drug use. So, opposing counsel decides to call their client for direct examination and asks, you don't use heroin and crack, right? That is, for the non-lawyers, a very stupid question for many reasons, especially considering his client didn't show up for his drug test. However, I fully expected the defendant to just lie and say he was clean. After the question was asked, there was a really long pause and the defendant said, yes, I do both of those drugs. My head almost exploded. I didn't ask any questions on cross-examination because I didn't want to muddy the waters. I won, and the child is doing great. Not mine, but my boss's one. She had to defend a small-time delinquent as duty solicitor. Before going to court, he asked her what he should do. She explained to him, if he was cooperative and truthful, his sentence would be milder. After hearing the case, the judge asked him if he wanted to add something. He got up and explained to the judge, my counsel told me to be truthful, so I wanted to tell you that I not only did the robbery I'm being heard for, but also several others in the region. He continued to admit to several robberies that had been unsolved yet, and everyone, even the state attorney, were facepalming. I'm not a lawyer, but I was a character witness for my childhood dog in a civil trial between our neighbors and my parents. Opposing counsel was questioning me. I wasn't even out of elementary school at the time, and he asked if our dog was aggressive. She was a Rottweiler and very loving and incredibly protective of me and my siblings. His final question to me is one I will never forget. He asked, did your father tell you what to say before you came into court today? I responded yes. Then he asked, what did he tell you to say? I said the truth. Now, I was too young to remember the courtroom reaction, but according to my father, the judge audibly guffawed and the opposing counsel lost all the wind out of his sails. Watching a hearing when the defendant said, I did stab her, but it was a gentle stabbing. I was the defendant, representing a non-profit that I volunteered for. The plaintiff was a 60-something grandma who was looking for a retirement settlement after falling out of her jacked-up pickup truck in our parking lot. The premise of her case was that our parking lot was in bad shape. It was, and that she fell into a pothole and broke her leg, which resulted in her having to take Carmadin and diminished her enjoyment of salads at the Friday night fish fry. No, Really? It was going along fine until my lawyer put up a photo of the pothole taken the day of the incident, filled to the brim with water after a recent rain. He asked the lady if she had gotten her foot wet, to which she replied that she couldn't recall. He talked a little more about how perhaps if her foot wasn't wet, it might have been because she fell out of the truck and didn't really fall into the pothole. He asked again if her foot was wet, and she affirmed that yes, her foot was wet. The oh shit moment came when he went back to his desk, flipped through her deposition and read the part where she was extremely adamant that her foot wasn't wet. Then he did some fancy legal stuff. The case was thrown out and I went back to work. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment your oh crap moments in court down below. Have a fantastic day and don't let your memes be dreams.